design of the North Penn High School addition. All reports on this process will be provided as additional meetings are held. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, questions or comments for John or for Art? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 2B, Community Services and Policies. Don Hill.
Yes, thank you. The Policy Committee has been working on a number of policies. We'd like to bring one forward this evening for the first reading. It's titled Organizational Fund Management. It was a concern of the Board of Directors that we clearly delineate the relationship between the school board and the different associations within the school district. Let me read part of this policy, and I won't read it all. The members of the audience has copies of it, and copies are available. The Board of School Directors recognizes the independence of school-related groups and their fundraising endeavors from the district control. Moreover, the board recognizes the important contribution these schools-related groups make to the overall quality of education in the district and the valuable benefits they confer on school-community relations. We think those groups are important and we want them to continue. In an effort to support the continuing fiscal security of these and other school-related groups, it shall be the policy of the North Penn School District to encourage said groups to adopt policies to safeguard their funds through the use of generally accepted accounting and auditing procedures and other sound fiscal policies. Accordingly, the district recommends that every such school-related group, and there's some guidelines that are given in that area. So I'd like to bring this policy forward for approval at the first reading. Do we have to vote on that or not?
No.
Okay, first reading. That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Don. Questions or comments for Don?
Only quick one, Don, when that's finished, will there also be some objective criteria so that it helps evaluate who qualifies or not as the groups that may submit to be covered, so we don't get into difficulties in that area?
If I understand your question correctly, you're saying, what groups does this cover? It covers all groups that work within the North Penn School District, whether it be the North Penn Association of Gifted Education or North Penn Boosters Club or Music Aids or PTAs or homeschooled associations. All those organizations fall under that blanket.
But with a clear association is what you're saying, though, with the school district, I assume, not just TYA, or, in other words, there should be some objective criteria to make it easier for those who have to.
We would be happy to provide a list for the board of those that we would recommend for your approval.
Oh, okay, so
we
it will
would
be
be
going
happy to
through.
provide a list.
Okay.
Of those parent, we refer to them as parent support groups.
Okay.
Not the community-based groups that do not have school affiliation, but the school support groups that have a clear affiliation with the school.
That's what I was wondering, the
Yes.
criteria. Thank you.
Well, any other questions for Don or for Ken? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 2C, Elementary Education. Bill Allen.
Yes, as of June 17th, we have 926 students registered for kindergarten. Thank you. End of report.
Questions or comments for Bill or for Tom? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 2D, Secondary Education. Pat Mosey.
No report, Mr. President.
Questions or comments for Pat? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 2E, Special Education and Student Services. Sharice Krieger.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Clements. In the area of special education and student services, there are several items on the agenda for approval this evening. There is a recommendation to approve the budgeted amount of $27,807 for summer hours for counselors. This is not a new request, but rather a routine request that has been on the board's agenda since 1980. In addition to summer hours for counselors, there is a recommendation to approve summer hours for psychologists. Psychologists are needed over the summer to evaluate early entrance students, to test special education and gifted students when required, and to evaluate students requiring more specialized programs such as the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit or an approved private school. The $8,000 budgeted for summer work is the same amount as budgeted for the last 3 years. A request is also being made from the department to approve the special education plan. This is a yearly routine function required by the state to update any new positions or programs at the district level. Under federal grants, we have a request to apply for the Drug-Free School Grant. This grant is used to supplement the DARE program and to continue the use of drug and alcohol specialists to support student assistant efforts. Also on the agenda is the request for approval of a life skills support student enrolled in the special education work-study program who is employed by the North Penn School District. The last request is to approve the hourly rate for the medical and dental examiners, clerks, and team physicians for football at the same rate as last year. End of report.
Thank you, Sharice. Questions or comments for Sharice or for Judy? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 2F, Support Services, David Whites.
No report.
Questions or comments for David? Hearing none, we'll move on to item G, Finance, Vicki Sheriff.
And as we all know, that later tonight, we will be having a motion to pass the budget for the 1996-97 school year. Proposed rate of taxation is a 14.8 mil tax hike. Other than that, 14.5, no, sorry, we've got 3 mils. I was correct? 14.8 mil tax hike, excuse me. And that'll be coming later this evening, as well as fixing the rate of pay for our staff throughout the district. This is for finance.
Any other questions or comments on finance? Dennis, for Vicki, for Don? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item H, Personnel, Donna Mingle.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Many people will agree that Juan Bond is going to be tough to replace, but just as many people will agree that we're going to have to try anyway. And tonight, I am recommending that Bert Hines, a current assistant principal up at North Penn High School, be so designated and appointed to the interim acting principalship of the North Penn High School. That position, if you all approve, will start effective July 1, 1996, for an indeterminable amount of time while Dr. Bose and this board pursues the hiring of a full-time active principal at North Penn High. I would like to make a motion, Mr. President, that Burton Hines be appointed to the position of interim acting principal and to be compensated at the current rate that would be approved this evening, and for 20 additional days this summer for the summer work so needed at the high school.
Second.
You do it now? Double check, she's made. I'll turn to our solicitor. Would it be okay for us to entertain a motion at this time in the agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Been a motion made by Ms. Mingle, second by Mr. Hill. Questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you, Mr. President. Personnel has been quite busy, as all committees have been, as we have dragged ourselves through the budget process. Personnel is quick to recognize that much has been done by the current sitting board since it took office in December. Just to name a few of those things that we have had to do as a board, we completed the redistricting of the middle schools along with the upgrading of curriculum and extracurriculum at the middle school level. We've upgraded science labs at Penfield and Pembroke, returned honors to the middle school curriculum, clarified and tightened up team teaching with the help of Dr. Bond, ceased all activities to build a second high school while at the same time approving an option to expand the current high school with a dollar amount not to be exceeded. We reorganized and streamlined the administration with the help, of course, and leadership of Dr. Bose. We instituted an early retirement incentive program, and we've taken this first budget of ours from 27 mils down to 14.8 mils as we sit tonight. This board has been very busy, and personnel has been just as busy along the way, because in amongst all those duties and accomplishments this board has made, we have lost personnel director in Fred Schmidt, but quickly put on a very competent leader in our school district, Judith Miller, and she has continued on with work and personnel. Personnel recognizes that as this budget is concerned, we are not finished our work, and there are many items that each and every one of you have brought up that we have not lost sight of. One of those items is that we are committed on personnel to look at the substitute pay practices we currently have. I know that's a fond item of Mrs. Scher's and all of you, and I pledge to you as personnel liaison, along with Dr. Miller, that we will move ahead and look at making arrangements and rearrangements in the substitute pay area that would directly benefit this community and our budget. Though you may approve a budget tonight, that doesn't mean that we can't do better than the budget that would be approved tonight. We also are looking at enveloping the employee assistance program, possibly, if it can be done, not for this current year, but the following year, into our flex benefits plan. If that can be done, Dr. Miller and I will certainly attempt to pursue that at a personnel level. Also, again, I think it's important that personnel acknowledge tonight listed the many, many, many retirees that will retire at the end of this school year, June 30. Many of those retiring were ones that saw fit to take us up on our early retirement incentive, and that in itself has produced a significant gain and a reduction in the budget that will be hopefully approved tonight. So I thank Dr. Miller for certainly the great opportunity I have had to work with her and whatever contributions she and I have been able to make to the budget process. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Okay, questions or comments from personnel? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 2I, legislative. Donna Mengel, Vicky Scher.
The only mention I would make, Mr. President, is that there is currently legislative initiative going on to have public hearings prior to the replacement of appointed board members. That's currently, I believe, in the House. There's no decision made, and as one, should a decision come through, we certainly would keep this board informed. Also, the MCIU Legislative Committee did not meet this month, so I have nothing to bring forward from there. I don't know if Mrs. Scher has something to add.
I picked it up today from Senator Greenleaf's office. I guess I should give him some thanks for the assistance his office has been to me. And it's from the Senate Education Committee. We've heard some murmurings about a Senate Bill 188. It's the bill regarding the reorganization of school districts. Many of us hadn't seen that. We had heard, though, as though this has already been passed by the House and Senate, which was not the standing of the bill. As a matter of fact, it basically just left committee. It would need to go through the General Assembly before it actually does become an amendment to the school code. The bill would amend Article 2 of the school code and adding Section 299. What it does is, what its intent is to allow any school district organized under a subdivision to reorganize into two or more smaller school districts. The reorganization effort requires a preparation plan for reorganization. There are certain factors and conditions that are required here. Rather than go through this right now, I'd just like to clarify that what we have heard regarding allowing a consolidated school district to break out has not been approved by the General Assembly, but rather has left committee. And I would pass this to Mr. Weir, please, so that he may make copies for each of the board members and also provide our solicitor, Mr. Bartle, with a copy also, and as well as one for internal records. The other is that another one that recently came out, and I myself personally have not been able to read this, what with budget and receiving this afternoon myself. It's regarding charter schools, and it is making some alterations regarding funding, and this is at the House. So I don't know who's interested with this one. I would say if there's an interest by particular board members, let Mr. Weir know. House 1834, I believe it is, because it's approximately 30 pages. If you don't want the paper at home, then it's best to leave it with him in his file. That's the end of my report.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Questions or comments for Donna or Vicky?
The only question I have, Tom, is that when these are presented, and for Mr. Weir to him, can members of the public also request copies of those too?
There's no reason why not.
That's all, they're all
They're public
documents,
bills.
right?
I mean, there's no sense in making them
So
jump through hoops.
if people are interested in those, they can-
We would provide
or the
such.
legislators. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 2J, North Monco Technical Career Center. Jointly, Bill, Donna, and Pat.
We had our meeting, last meeting was May 20th, I believe it was, and they pushed the June meeting back to the next week. So We haven't had a meeting since our last.
So we have no report.
We have no report.
Come on, just get it out.
Why did it take me so long to say?
Three Stooges, right?
Any questions or comments on VOTech school? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item 2K, Merck Science Partnership, David Whites.
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. In the area of professional development, on Tuesday of this week, all of our elementary staff participated in both a school-based and district-wide in-service. During the district-level program, teachers selected from mathematics, science, and technology sessions offered by presenters from the Merck Institute, members of our staff and others. In partnership activities, plans are being finalized for this year's Leader Teacher Institute, in which 60 North Penn teachers will begin their second year of a 3-year program. Again this year, Leader teachers will participate in one of 3 content strands: the structure of matter, the earth, and the interdependence of life. This year's Leader Teacher Institute will be held at Walton Farm Elementary from July 30th through August 15th. 90 additional North Penn teachers will investigate mathematics and science topics through their participation in peer teacher workshops, also held at Walton Farm during the week of August 19th. End of report.
Thank you, David. Questions or comments on the Merck Science Partnership? John, did you have anything you wanted to add? Sorry. Questions or comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to item L, long-range planning. Tom Clemens, Donna Mengel, Vicky Sher, David Whites. I guess I'll comment first. The only comment I have is that we are scheduled, our regularly scheduled work session in August. The night is August 6th. We have scheduled to discuss nothing but long-range planning that evening. That is on the schedule. That's all I have for long-range planning at this point. Any other comments?
I've been scheduled for this. We spent 3 days in June with the long-range planning team. It may be hard for everyone to follow the organizational, but the planning team is an umbrella above the 10 various action teams. The 3 days were spent reviewing and building consensus and basically rolling up sleeves and looking through the various reports that came in from those 10 action teams. From that review, revisions and edits were suggested, which will be completed after the respective teams actually have a chance to look at the suggestions that came forward. Again, they within their own organization there will work to accept, or if they want to move ahead, then they will come back. And the final products will be ready for presentation. They expect to be on schedule, as you said, Tom, for early August. And I think the public does need to know that while we do expect a September vote on this, these documents will be available for community review for 30 days. There will be an opportunity for members of the community to come in and review what the final plan is. And again, then we should be on schedule for a vote in September. Sandy, do you have anything else to add to this? It was very productive, and it was a great group of people that were getting together, and they devoted a tremendous amount of time. I mean, to actually realize that you found members of this community who left work to come in for 3 days during the week or took vacation days to spend it working on action plans. It was pretty nice weather, too, on that side.
More comments on long-range planning?
How's Dr. Mangano holding up?
Good.
Is that an appropriate question?
I keep nudging her if she starts to fall asleep.
On budget, Dr. Mangano?
Oh, we're holding up very well. We're well within
The budget range? It's to your credit, thank you.
Any other questions or comments for long-range planning? Hearing none, we'll move on to item M, other assignments. Any other assignments? Anyone? Okay. This concludes item 2. We'll now move on to item 3, to our audience of citizens. Before I open it to audience of citizens, I would like to take liberty to comment that at our last work session, we talked. There was quite a bit of talk on class size guidelines. Since that meeting, I've had dialogue back and forth with Tom Sugar, and I've asked Tom tonight to be prepared to answer questions. And I'd really would ask the board members that as people do come up, that we give Tom the opportunity to answer those questions. Because there were some discrepancies that night, and I know Tom's done a lot of work since then, and again, that's what I'd ask. Okay? Okay. Who's first? Please state your name and address, and again, I ask that you limit your questions and comments to 3 minutes.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the North Penn School Board, good evening. My name is Jeffrey Menk, and I reside in Talminson Township. I will be presenting you with a letter of petition with 45 signatures from concerned Englewood parents of upcoming 5th graders. The petition simply states, "We, the undersigned, parents of future 5th grade Englewood students, hereby petition the North Penn School Board to maintain class size of the 1995-1996 school year." Attached to this petition is a letter of explanation. The letter reads, "We would like to inform you that the proposed class size of Englewood 5th graders for the 1996-1997 school year would be 29 and 30 respectively. This is an increase. This reflects an increase of 50% from the previous year. We as parents feel that this is unacceptable and would be detrimental to our children's education. Classes of this size would not allow the teachers, regardless of teaching experience, to meet the individual needs of each student. Discipline problems that already exist would escalate to uncontrollable situations. The time spent on maintaining classroom control would thus take away from valuable instruction. Furthermore, the proposed increase would not allow for our children to participate in math classes which match their abilities. It is our concern that some children will be left behind while others will be bored and not meet their full potential. We believe that it is our children's right to an education that fully meets their needs. We as taxpayers are also sympathetic to those in the community who wish to cut spending. However, we must not cut spending at our children's expense. We understand that in the new budget, there is an allotment of $50,000 for a newsletter. We need to examine allocations such as this and ask ourselves, where are our priorities? In closing, we implore you, the board members, to take this letter seriously. We as parents demand and feel our children deserve better than what you are currently projecting for the 1996-1997 school year. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. More questions or comments? Ma'am?
My name is Joanne Orr, and I reside in Lansdale. My question's concerning facilities, and I don't know whether to address it to Mr. Schilling or Mr. Wood. Who wants it? It's about North Penn High School. Is it planned to close down the air conditioning for 6 weeks from July 4th for the following 6 weeks after that?
That is correct.
Okay. Can a portion of the money that you save in electricity be earmarked for window replacement on the second floor? Right now, they're all fixed. You can't open any of them. And it gets up to 100 degrees in the summer, and there are two dozen employees in North Penn that work in that building those 6 weeks.
Mrs. Orr, that dollar saving is $27,000, and if we were to take that and begin a fund to replace windows or place movable sash on the second floor, I think it would take a considerable amount of time until we could do that.
I know. It should have been started a while ago.
Well, I think, it's a decision that the board would have to make if they truly want to put movable sash there. We have shut down because we think the $27,000 savings is important, but more so, it reduces the wear and tear on the existing chillers and also reduces our contract price for service as it relates to our service agreement with our provider for service on that air conditioning equipment. I do recognize that it's difficult for those people working in the building but we do, we do open the doors on the lower level. We use fans wherever we can, and it's just a shame that the building wasn't built with movable sash, but it's a condition that we've lived with for the last, I would say 10 years where we've been shutting down.
Can we move your office over there?
I have spent many days, in fact, I will this summer at the Penndale renovation in very hot conditions. I can relate to those conditions.
I don't understand why it can't be a long-range, slow financial commitment to correct an architectural mistake that never should have happened 25 years ago.
Well, and the interesting thing, and this board has discussed it, we have discussed it administratively, the building was spec'd with movable sash, and in the 11th hour there was a change that made them fix sash.
So
Art,
there's no
could you
future.
clarify for the board which building we're talking about?
North Penn High School.
The high school.
We're talking about
The only
North
high
Penn
school
High
we
School.
have. And I really
Well, there
feel
were
it should be
questions going around the
considered.
board, and
We don't care about
I really think it should be considered as the savings, a portion of the savings, $25,000 a year, be set aside to replace a few windows at a time in each pod, so there can be some air circulation. The temperatures of 100 degrees promotes mold growth when it's shut down for 6 weeks, let alone the 24 people that have to work in those conditions.
I have Mr. Kelly in the audience, and I think we would all agree that we have not reached 100-degree temperatures.
No, he's the one that told me. They have been reached. I'm sure last summer when the temperatures mid-July were 105.
Okay.
I'm sure. Okay, and my other comment is I want to wish the best to Dr. Bond. And thank you for the accomplishments and the things you have initiated that have helped students and employees and parents alike. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Clements, I just have one question for Dr. Bose in relationship to that. I mean, is this something that is going to be looked at by the facilities committee that we put together for the renovations and the expansion at the high school? I mean, is this something that's also going to be taken into consideration? Because I remember little bits and pieces of conversation when that building was, when we decided to do that, that a portion of the existing building and some of the amenities there were also going to be looked at. Are the existing...
We'll turn that back over to our facilities liaison, John Schilling, and Art and Dr. Bose, and we'll let them come back with an update. Okay?
I just like to know, what is the activity in that portion of the building?
The only activity is our summer restoration.
Are there classes going on?
No, there are no classes. We have learned through having an individual electric service for the modulars at Pembroke that it's our least expensive building to operate for summer school, the modulars. So we hold summer school there. The office area, the guidance area, and the scheduling area is in fact air conditioned at North Penn High School. It's a separate unit that runs throughout the entire summer. The main chiller that cools the main part of the building is in fact shut down.
Okay, but we don't really have a regular flow of people.
We have our
We don't
custodial
have a
cleaners restoring the building.
Okay.
There's no other activity in the building. And I need to share with the board that the addition and the new facilities will have movable sash. I mean, as long as I'm involved, we'll never build another building with fixed sash.
Is the custodial services over the summer as routine as they are? I would think not doing as routine as they are during a school year when we have
They're very
2,500 students.
They're much more intense. We are stripping floors, we are
Okay,
washing
it's the
all
heavy
the student
duty.
furniture
Okay.
with germicidal, and then we're stripping floors, re-waxing.
So it's going to, that's fine.
Okay, but let's
Thank you, Tom.
come back to our audience of citizens. Hold on.
Excuse me, Mr.
Mr. Kelly
is-
would like to make a comment, and I think that's appropriate at this point.
When it gets that hot upstairs, we usually try to bring them downstairs where it's cooler, and then we'll go back upstairs when we turn back on.
We do come back on mid-August, so we have from August 15th with our cleaning crew to do the second floor. But many of the areas on the first floor are open. I mean, your gymnasium is open.
Right.
The pool door's open to the outside. There are a lot of areas. I mean, we're not going to be inhumane about the process.
Okay,
Point
yeah.
clarification, I think they thought there was a lot more activity going on.
There's
at that
not.
school.
Okay,
Okay.
ma'am.
My name is Chris Kiesling. I live in Lansdale, Stonemason Way. And before I get started, I would like to congratulate Dr. Bond on his successful years at North Penn, and we will all miss you. Why I'm here today is I'm also supporting a group of Englewood students or Englewood parents that have a concern about the class increase. I have a son that attends Nash, and he's in 5th grade. He is currently, well, was currently in a class of 29 students. And I had talked to Dr. Sugar over the phone, and I was informed of class increase numbers. And I also had written a letter to Dr. Bose, and hopefully he distributed that to board members. And what my concern is that these increased numbers, and from what I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong, 30 would be the number, the maximum number, from what I understand, for grades 4 through 6. And I can tell you firsthand, having a child with a class of 29, it was a very difficult year for everyone. Particularly at Nash, they have a high percentage of children there that are bused in from other schools. My son should be going to Walton Farms, but because he has some special needs, he goes to Nash, as do some other children coming. There might be some children from Englewood that also go to Nash because they have increased special education there. So while my child will be mainstreamed into a class of 29 students because he has ADD, and there's a high percentage of children with IEPs and special needs. So for example, at Nash, in his class, there could be 29 students, but there could be as many as 30% with IEPs or special needs. And if you compare that to another school of 30 students, and any other school with 30 students, they may have maybe a 7% percentage of students with special needs. And if you're going to strictly go by numbers, you could, at Nash, for example, they have 28, 29, and 29. You could take another school that has 30, 30, and 31, and that particular school might go ahead and get another teacher, where I think it's very important to take into consideration that if you're going to be busing children to other schools outside of their home school and telling them that they're going to be getting better special education, and then you have to, it's mandated by the state that they be mainstreamed into the regular education classroom as mandated by the state, that being the least restrictive education, you can see that this process is unfair. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Okay, any more questions or comments? No.
Hi, my name is Cindy Hensler, and I live in Talmenson, and I'm a parent at Englewood. I have a child going into 5th grade, and I would like to know at what point will there be a 3rd, 5th grade? I mean, how many students will it take to put a 3rd, 5th grade in there?
What we have to do is we have to keep watching the numbers, because just as easily as it could go up, it could very easily go down. So
Sure.
what we will continue to do is monitor these numbers and make a decision, in August. Certainly with a number of 30, we would look at either splitting the classroom or adding an aide, because we still have aides, and that certainly is another possibility that we have. But I know that just from the report that I made last week, and from the report that I would be able to make tonight, if I were going to quote the same kind of numbers, many of them have changed. We have lost 4 children in one section and, gained 5 in another school. So right now, although 30 is high, and that certainly is 2 above our class size guidelines, which is what we normally would look for to definitely split a class. That's why we haven't made any movement at this time, knowing that we have 6 other classes that are also perched at around the same possibility. But to make a movement at this point in time is probably, we feel, premature.
Okay, but I'm not asking about movement. I want to know at what number will somebody say, well, an 8 is not enough, we need a 3rd classroom?
I said usually around 30 is when we go 2 over, that's usually when we consider splitting the class.
Oh, at 30 is when you consider?
Yes, that's what I said, yes.
Okay, so
Well,
in
I
August,
think
if the
now-
classes are still at 30, a 3rd classroom will be added?
I will not make that guarantee at this point in time, because if we have 4 or 5 classes at 30 or 31 or 32.
You mean throughout the district?
Throughout the district, then we have to look at what we are dealing with at that point in time. But certainly any class that's at 30 will be given full consideration for splitting.
I don't understand why, if there are 5 or 6 classes throughout the district with 30, that they don't all get split into a 3rd or 4th, whatever it takes. I mean, I don't know who's this, you know, I'm talking to you because you're the one with the numbers, but I don't understand. I mean, we're fighting for Inglewood naturally because that's where our children go, but I don't think anybody's child should be in a class of 30. And if you're looking at it and saying, well, you know, you can't cry because you're not the only one, there are other schools, my question is, it shouldn't be happening in any of the schools. And why are we cutting the budget so bare that our children are suffering? I mean, if you as the school board don't care about the children, who's going to care about them? You know, this is what scares me. There are a lot of kids out there that don't have the parental support that you see here, the few that you see here, and they're the ones that are suffering. And I really feel sorry for the community as a whole when these children grow up going through classes of 30 and the delinquency goes up and the property values go down and this whole community just falls apart and someone says, oh, wow, you know, I guess we should have thought about that. I think it's time to think about it before it happens. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions or comments, Mayor?
You will forgive me. It took me a while, but I began to sense that there was a change since I was here last. I didn't get in line. I will the next time. I wanted to ask that one thing, or ask you if, as a board, if you would put the trips. Oh, I'm sorry.
Adrian, your name and address?
Oh, will this take my time? I have mine's a 5-minute one. I'm sorry, you know, I mean, it was the only one I had. My name is Adrian Handerhan.
Thank you, Adrian.
Pardon?
Thank you for your name.
Okay, and I have an address, 506 Spruce Street, North Wales.
Thank you.
19454. And I'm sure my telephone number's on file. I would like to have the trips, the staff travel, put back on the public agenda. It had been on until Dr. Elko landed here in the position of superintendent, and it was removed at that time and put under his jurisdiction. I don't want to get into the legality of that, but it is public monies. It is being spent for public whatever, and would like to see that put back on the agenda. Now, where do we go from here? Do you answer me? Do you consider it? What do we do? I'm not clear.
We'll discuss it at a later date.
Discuss it at a later date. Now, I have a specific reason for asking for this, and I am going to tell you why. Prior to Dr. Elko's leaving, he had attended a strategic planning meeting in somewhere in New York and was accompanied by the strategic planning director at that time, Susan Sinkinson. They later on, I think there was another strategic planning meeting out in St. Louis or somewhere there, which they attended. Now, when push came to shove and we were up against a deadline on that strategic planning, Dr. Mangano was appointed, and she had a lot of work that had to be done in a short period of time. And this is a classic example, and that, of course, was not on the agenda. But there were 2 trips for 2 specific purposes by 2 people involved in a specific area where public monies were expended on this, and no one received any information that was of help to the incoming person. So because of these types of things, and I think there's a wealth of information out there, but I just would like to see that put back on the agenda, because technically it's my money and I'd like to see where it's going.
Thank you, Adrian.
And the other thing that I wanted...
That concludes your time.
Oh.
After we go around and you'd like to, we
Oh,
always.
can
get-
I
we-
sit down and get up again if you have time?
We will go around, we've done that in the past, and we will allow that tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
I haven't been here for quite a while, so I'm a little behind time.
I know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other, ma'am?
Linda Abram, Upper Gwinnett. I'd like to go back to the class size guideline issue. I missed the last meeting. We're talking numbers here of 30 for grades 4, 5, and 6. I heard that mentioned earlier.
That is, the class size guidelines have not officially changed.
That's my question.
Right, the
Did I
class
miss
size
something?
guidelines have not officially changed. What I stated at the last few meetings was that what I was working on was I was looking at, to make things fit, I was using K and 1 at 25, 2 and 3 at 27, and 4 through 6 at 30. But that was for my informational purposes. This board has not entertained the prospect of changing class size guidelines. In some cases, we are above slightly those class size guidelines, as we have been sometimes in the past, okay? But I do want to make it clear that this board has not, as of this date, done anything to change the class size guidelines.
If class size guidelines were to be changed, is it a point of topic at a public meeting such as this? In other words, will the public be made aware if those guidelines are changed? Will we be told after the fact, or will we have an opportunity to continue to express some input on this matter?
You would certainly have an opportunity to express your opinion. And while we're on that subject, I mean, I've done some, but we will be sure to bring all the facts to the table as where the guidelines were in the past years and when we did exceed the guidelines as we just have this past year. I'll get, for instance, North Wales this past year was at 29 and 29. I did some research back on my own on some other years on where we've definitely exceeded the guidelines. But as Dr. Sugar has said, we plan to stay with the class size guidelines as written.
Okay. It's one thing, my son was in a 4th grade class with 29 children. 20 of them were boys, you can imagine. And it was very successful, I will say. It was a very successful year. He had an excellent teacher. But when you exceed class size guidelines in certain situations, that's one thing. When we increase those class size guidelines to be the accepted norm in the district, I think we need to understand that in fact will happen in all of these classes. What it means in my mind is that if those class size guidelines are increased, that means that in a particular case, a teacher, to make 3 classes instead of 2, as they were referencing in Inglewood, we would not go to 3 because we would not be able to hire that 3rd teacher. As I'm understanding this, that's what happens. So the numbers would be higher in those 2 classes. If you break it down to 3, you'd need a 3rd teacher. And I just want to express my concern that we keep the fact that the children's education is what's most important here. I would like to see that we stay with what we have, because we do vary from them. Yes, Tom, I do agree. We have varied from them over the years, but it has not been across the board higher numbers in all of our classes, K through 6. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cindy Granenko, and I'm from Towamencin. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight, but seeing that it's Dr. Vaughn's last meeting, I have to say thank you. I've always appreciated having him here at these meetings. He's added a little bit of humor and some seriousness, and I, for one, have enjoyed having him up here. I want to thank Tom Sugar for all the help trying to work with the board with higher numbers. I appreciated your format last meeting Tuesday night so that we could see how big the classes were going to be, or in some areas how small they were going to be. It was easy to follow, it was concise, and it made it a pleasure as a parent to be able to look at it and understand really what was going to impact the kids. And I know you were told, play with the numbers, and I, for one, appreciate that we got to see that too. So I really appreciate that, and your concern for the class size also. And I have spoken about class size before. I'm one of the Inglewood parents that's going to face 30 in the class if you don't approve another teacher. I worry about August. I worry about making a decision in August. That means scrambling around to try to hire a teacher. And again, like one of the other parents spoke, who's the lucky school to get the teacher, and is this going to be looked at and say, okay, well, we do need 6 teachers. I don't get the impression that this board is going to go out if there's 6 classes that are reaching 30 and hire 6 teachers. Am I right in my impressions? Can anybody answer that? If 6 classes reach 30 at that grade level, will we see 6 new teachers?
They're all hypothetical situations. This year, there were 3 or 4 classes that were at 29.
Right. Well, Dr. Sugarson made the comment about 30. You know, when I looked back at the guidelines before, there was a 10% leeway that was written into the 1990 guidelines that were adopted and then redone in 93. They were stated at the bottom, 1993. It had the numbers with the 10% leeway. Now we have a number of 30. There's no leeway according to what I was just understood to believe. So 30 to me means we need a new teacher. And an aide at that point is not acceptable in my opinion. From what I understand, aides have certain limitations with the students. They're not working with the students, they're helping the teacher in that area. So my concern is, last year we were over the guidelines of 90 and 93. Nobody talked about it, it was accepted, nobody even knew about it. We weren't given a list like Tom Sugar supplied us with, which again, I really appreciate, because I heard so many grumblings all years at different schools about my daughter's 2nd grade class has 29 kids in it. And everybody said, well, how can that be? The guidelines are whatever they were with 10%. So you were already many, many numbers in children above the guidelines then. And I just would like you to look at it and tell us as parents really what the decisions are going to be. And I hope I hear some discussion tonight to continue what we've said. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions or comments? Sir?
My name's Art Ramsey, North Wales. First, I want to thank Donna Mangle, Pat Mosey, and Don Hill, and Tom Clemens for holding the line on the budget. You did a very good job. And John Schilling, too, I forgot to mention you. But what I'm here for is about vandalism in our schools. Now, maybe Dr. Bourne can help me out before he leaves us, or maybe Frank Bartle can help me also. I read in the paper where a 16-year-old boy was caught smoking pot and things like that in the high school. And also a girl, 17 years old, she was rifling lockers and jewelry, stealing jewelry and stuff like that. Now, when this happens, why can't we put their names in the paper? First, I'll ask you, Dr. Bourne, why can't we publish their names in the paper when something like this happens? Because we have a lot of it, and we've got to start putting a stop to a lot of this stuff.
I think Mr. Bartle will be better to answer that question, but I don't think it's fair to say that we have a lot of it. I think that, and that's one of the things that's concerned to me all year. You have to recognize that we have 2,550 students at the high school. If you take a look at all the reports in the paper and talk about how many students that is, you won't be able to say it's a lot.
Okay,
It's a misnomer to think. It's a misnomer to think that you can put 2,550 great students in a place and not have some of those things happen. When we discover that a youngster breaks the rules, they're punished by the school. When we find that they've broken the law, they're punished by the juvenile court system. And Mr. Bartle will have to answer the question as to why they can't put their names in the paper. I know the answer, but I think...
We're not permitted by law to do that. And secondly, when it goes to the juvenile authorities, they're not permitted by law to do that. So in either instance, it would not be permissible.
So there's no way of changing the law? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, I never said there's no way of changing the law. This board does not have the authority to change that.
And you can't go to bat for us and try to get it changed?
I represent this board.
I know
This
you do.
board does not have the authority to do what you ask. It is not permissible from a standpoint of this board.
So who picks up the tab on all this vandalism that I'm reading here in your thing here tonight? Do the taxpayers pay all this, or are we covered by insurance on all these figures that I'm reading here?
Well, again, sir, I don't know what figures you're reading, but generally speaking, when a matter is handled through the juvenile system, there's often a provision for restitution. That may or may not be the case in every instance, but generally that is the case.
We hold with that, and we work very closely with the juvenile system. And if a youngster is through the system, we get the money back from through the system. And if it's not a criminal, if they don't get into the system, we hold them responsible ourselves. There are many times when youngsters have either come in and cleaned the mess up themselves, or they've given us the money that we give to Mr. Wood because of their vandalism. If they're caught, they pay the price.
You mean the parents pick up the tab?
I guess that depends on whose youngster it is. There's a lot of youngsters who get in trouble whose parents do not pay the tab. Those youngsters do, and I know that for a fact.
But you're telling me now that percentage-wise, we're not having too much dope problems in our school there?
I think if you have any dope problem, it's too much. I say that if you take a look at the percentages, it's not as significant as it is in most places in this country.
For the number of pupils that we have in the school?
Pardon me?
For the number of pupils that we have in the school?
Absolutely. But I want to make sure you understand me very clear, because what you said was that we don't have too much. We have too much if we have any. Any is too much. And we're very, very, very adamant about that. We've come to the board for expulsions for that. And the board has agreed and has done that.
Mr. Ramsey, I'd ask that you would conclude your comments.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, we'll come back to Adrian.
I wanted to ask the administration and the board in the coming months to do whatever is necessary and really work on the computer and technology problem. I noticed in the agenda tonight that the Merck Institute, along with the science, has introduced the field, is evidently getting into the field of technology. I am concerned because over the last, whatever it is, 10, 12, 15 years, we have probably averaged at least $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. It has been both in the general budget and it's been in bond issues. And I personally, when the summer is over and things are at a lull, I would like to ask Dennis Kelly if, with all of the computers that we have bought, he could flip through and see exactly how much money has been spent over the last 10, 12 years for computers. It has to be in the millions. And for this, I was not aware until recently, within the last 3 or 4 months, that a gentleman that was brought in here back late last fall, a Mr. Louis Nyman, I believe, or Nyman. Is that correct? Is that his name? Nyman, Mr. Nyman? Is he in charge of computers?
He's the manager of technology.
Pardon?
His official title is Manager of Technology.
Oh, Manager of Technology.
Yes.
For a minute there, I thought we didn't have an employee by that name. I was under the impression that he was brought in to begin a curriculum of K through 12. I find this is not the case. In various articles in the paper, in the reorganization chart, it has listed mostly at the administrative level. Now, I have in my hands here report cards. They're not from any school in the state of Pennsylvania, naturally. From grade 1, on that, along with the English and the reading, is listed computers, and there's a mark in it. There's a mark in it for 4th grade, and that goes right straight through. They have 2 periods a week starting in 1st grade in this school with computers, and it goes right straight through. Now, I believe with the amount of money and the size of this budget, something should be done. I constantly hear and see in the paper and read about, hear it on the radio, the future and the technology. And I really feel that there should be laid out, and I was very, very upset, or am upset, and very disappointed that this particular, I suppose, assignment does not fall under the jurisdiction of anybody in this district. Now, I am positive that there are the people, they probably have access.
Adrian, I've given you a fair amount of time. I'd ask you to
Right,
conclude
but
your comments.
will you, Mr. Clemens, as president of this board, see if some movement cannot be made to see that each student in this district gets some computer learning beginning with this coming year?
Mr. Clemens.
I wish you
I'll
would.
defer that to Mr. Weitz.
Mrs. Anderson, if I could answer your
It's his
question
area
very
Yes,
briefly.
yes.
Expertise.
Yes,
Is that I
David.
know you have not been attending the meetings regularly, but we are in the midst of a very extensive strategic planning process. Technology is one of those components. Curriculum is another one of those components. And if you're here on the evening of August the 6th, you don't even have to wait for the summer to end, there will be a presentation from all of those committees. Technology will be presented, and so will curriculum, and I think
Right.
your questions will be answered at that time.
May I ask if you're serving on that committee,
Yes,
David?
on the technology committee, I am.
Right, and are you expecting, or have you any knowledge that the technology and the curriculum will be entwined at some point, or are you not familiar with that?
That is the intent of the entire strategic planning process, to make sure that all of those processes are intertwined.
Right.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
Adrian.
much, David.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. Before we move on to our next page, I just would like to announce to the community really what our summer schedule does look like. I announced it at our work session, but feel I should repeat it. On July 9th, this board will meet at 7:45 a.m. For a short order of business. On July 23rd, this board will meet again at 7:45 a.m. for a short order of business. Both times, we will take action on certain items for those meetings. On August 6th, as I stated earlier, this board will meet for a regularly scheduled work session, but that work session will be entirely devoted to long-range planning. On August 27th, again, this board will meet at 7:45 a.m. I expect that to be a short meeting where we will vote on a short amount of items. And finally, on September 10th, we will begin our work session on the language arts review, and there may be other items to attach to that agenda. We haven't worked that out entirely, but we will begin with language arts. So that is a little bit of a prelude to what will come about this fall.
Tom?
Yes.
While you're doing that, are you also canceling the meetings of July 18th and August 15th?
That is correct.
I think you should announce
Yes,
that, too.
yes, they will, because they are on your school calendar. Thank you, Bill. Okay, let's move on to our next page. I'll turn it over to our superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. The first recommendation for you to consider is to establish through your vote the salaries for all personnel in the school district for the 1996-97 school year and work year who are not represented by any collective bargaining group. So obviously, that includes all the instructional teaching personnel and includes everybody else. Food service specialists, security guards, plant operations, secretaries, clerks, bookkeepers, nurses, aides, transportation personnel, administrative and supervisory personnel, and also the professional personnel as determined by the contract with the NPEA, as opposed to the unilateral decisions of regarding all the others that the board will make tonight as it considers this recommendation.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Mosey, second by Ms. Mengel. Questions or comments on the motion?
Question.
Question.
In the past, we've been afforded 3 categories which were voted on separately: food service, clerical, and administration. I don't recall ever really affirming on the professional staff, but for the 3 here that are now listed as 8 but being placed as one motion, I would like to request separation, please.
Of all of them?
As I said,
One
I
in
can
particular?
suggest food service, clerical, and administration as the categories generally have been followed. Otherwise, I'd say yes, it would have to be, as they've been broken out into 8 different levels here.
Okay, there's a
The
request.
3 that I recall in the past that we have followed.
So there, is your request to break them into 8 separate motions?
I prefer not to vote for each and every one of these as a, have to vote no on a whole package if that's not the actual intent. It's a request, if you want to disagree, that's fine.
You want to break them into 3 categories?
I think what Mrs. Scher is asking is the first 3 do as a category, and then, oh, I'm sorry, I stand corrected. The second 3?
No, the first and the second. It's
First.
support services, what's been support services, correct?
Food
So
service, the ones that I was responsible for would be
Clerical?
plant operations or facilities, food service, security, transportation.
And in the past, they've been just simply characterized as support service staff, correct?
That's correct.
So you're asking to separate out items 1, 2, 3, and 6? I'm looking for some help here, for clarification.
You just place 1, 2, and 3 as support food service, or support staff. And that would apply to all the support staff, which is actually how they came to us as salaries essentially. And then secretary, office, personnel.
Number 6 would also go under support staff, which is
Yes.
transportation.
6 goes underneath there.
So 1, 2, 3, and 6 is support.
1, 2, 3, and 6.
Right, help me out.
If I understand,
I'm asking our board secretary to help me out here.
if I understand correctly, Mrs. Scher, you're suggesting that number 1, number 2, number 3, number 5, I would include as support staff. Would you agree, colleagues? Number 5?
We've had 3 categories in the past.
And number
I believe that
6?
was where everyone but,
1, 2, 3,
administrative.
5, and 6 could be called support staff, and secretaries would be handled separately. We would normally include secretaries and support staff. So, with apologies to Mrs. Scher,
that's fine.
we would say 1 through 6 would all be support staff, to include food service, which we understand is in a separate budget. But 1 through 6, we normally would call support staff. And then I understand we would have a separate vote for number 7 and a separate vote for number 8. Is that acceptable?
That's fine.
Is that-
Clarification, number 8 is driven by the teacher's contract.
We don't even have to
Not,
vote
I
on
mean,
number
this is
8.
strictly union, and I don't recall ever voting on that one in the past.
There's no need
But
to vote
fine.
on number 8.
I don't either. I
I've never
concur.
recalled
We- that-
voting on the professional staff in the past.
Aren't we giving them an increase in our budget, though, that we have to...
These are
It's
contractual.
contractual, so when that vote was taken on the contract, the carry through the full length of the contract carries over for all.
We understand these salaries are all driven by the contract.
That's not the case.
There was discussion this week that the bargaining unit salaries might be
That they
approved
didn't.
as well. And I believe there is a list of those provided for you.
That's fine, if the advisement was to take it through, I just know it hasn't been in the past in many years that I've watched.
1 through 6.
Perhaps this is more appropriate.
Somebody just said that here that it was
Yeah.
recommended.
Right, okay.
Dennis, do you recall, forgive me, do you recall, have we needed in the past at any time a vote on the teachers?
No. Once the contract's approved, we don't usually vote on
Well,
the
then take it on.
Can we withdraw it with the board's permission?
Sure.
Is there a preference for withdrawing number 8?
I didn't know why it was on, that's why.
So the motion's 1 to 6, and then we do a separate motion again then
For
for 7,
7.
right?
And
That's it.
And we drop
That's
8.
We
it.
drop
I amend
8.
my second if Mr. Mosey will amend his motion.
I will amend my motion to read that we vote on items 1 through 6 as a separate category, we vote on item 7 as a separate category, and that we remove item 8 from the agenda since it is driven by the contract and does not have to be voted on at this time.
Thank you.
A second.
That sounds like it'll work. I just would like to just talk with our solicitor, that that's okay to drop item number 8?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, any other questions or comments on the motion and amended motion?
Just a comment I'd like to make. For many weeks, we have charged Dr. Bose with bringing in the staff salaries in at a 3% budget. And Dr. Bose, I thank you for not whining, crying, or bemoaning that charge. You've come through and have done just that, and I appreciate your can-do attitude. You were given that charge, and there was very little return other than the numbers coming in at that 3% allowance, and I thank you for that.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, we're voting on item 1 through 6.
Do you have the second now?
We have, yes, you had amended, Ms. Mingle amended it? Okay, we're ready to vote. Okay, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now we'll move on to the second motion, which is on item number 7, under administrative and supervisory. Questions or comments on that? Okay, hearing none, let's take a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Ayes have it. Motion carries. Okay, Mr. Superintendent, Dr. Superintendent.
Thank you. The next recommendation for the board's consideration is the adoption of the budget for the fiscal year 97, excuse me, because the number I'm about to say makes one nervous, in the amount of $106,596,596.04. That would become effective July 1 and end June 30, 1997.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Hill.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Mengel. Questions or comments on the motion?
Comment, Mr. President. I'd like to note, and Mr. Kelly, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but this is 14.8 mils.
That's correct.
Of anticipation. Mr. Clemens, I wanted on the public record that this was a very difficult budget, our first time out as a new board. We started at 27 mils, we're down to 14.8. I've come to understand from Mr. Kelly, our finance director, that 11 of those mills are directly related to the teacher's contract and a decision made by 5 other people last year. 2 mills are charged to the expansion needs at the VOTAC, bringing us in at 13 mills, which leaves 1.8 mills of new spending to accommodate 462 new students anticipated for September. This is not a shabby budget. Everybody here sitting at the table also realizes that we could do even better. There's items already mentioned tonight that we're going to continue to look at in the areas of substitute pay and many areas as we become to familiarize ourselves with one another and the entire budget itself and the process. So we all like to see a lower budget, but we're not this year, and I think this is the best that this board can do in the short period of time we had to accomplish this and the numerous other things mentioned earlier this evening. So I thank each and every board member as they participate in this process and the recommendations that everybody has made. Mr. Kelly, I thank you for working along with us, and Dr. Bose, your leadership is always appreciated.
Okay, more questions or comments on the motion?
Yes, Mr. Clemens, I do appreciate all the hard work that has been done here. It's been a very difficult process. We've all been underdogs as we've moved through with the budget, for which there was great confusion and very little time. However, I will say, as I've supported this board on each of the budget cuts that have been made in reducing this budget, it was at the very end to where there's been a separation between my spending philosophy and that of my fellow board members, in that I don't believe in taxing the community for dollars that you do not anticipate using and recognize as unjustified items inside the budget. I do believe, as you've worked hard to make changes, when it came down to establishing priorities in spending, many of the items which I brought forward were mocked as nickel and dime items, as effort that we didn't have time for. However, I sit here with about $200,000 in items, spending items or actual dollars inside the budget, which we at this moment know shouldn't be included inside this budget because it's in error. Yet we'll move forward with a taxation for those dollars and hope that perhaps we leave the money in the end when we close our budget off next June 30th. But in the meantime, we've taken the money from our tax base, we've taken it from the community, and we've had 1 year's jump on the collection of those dollars of recurring taxes. I commend everyone for what they have done, although I will have to make a correction. Beyond the 1.8 mil balance that comes between what is our actual needs for the budget for the teacher's contract, which is certainly the biggest drain, and the growth areas, there's an additional millage that's been collected, mills in dollars per se, or revenues, that's been collected that no one's talked about, and that's the approximate 5 mils worth of dollars, almost 1.6 million, Dennis, I believe, at the beginning of the budget process we discussed, that comes in from new revenues. Our mill value, our net gain on our mill value did increase. With a frozen tax base, and if we had frozen our taxes, we would have still began with approximately 5 mils of tax dollars simply from our growth in revenues. So we are working with more than 1.8 mil difference. Between our expenses and what we're actually taxing for, because that is money that's unseen, but it's still tax dollars and the revenues. My main position is I support the board on what it has done so far to date. However, I do believe there are many dollars inside this budget which are a lower priority than many to education than some of the areas which have been cut from the budget. And that's what makes it difficult for me, is to see some things be nixed and fall to the wayside that are so much further removed from the education of students than some of those items that have managed to pass with ease. My position on this budget, and I do hope we will continue to work to save those dollars and have them there at the end of the year. And I hope that the attitude will be to help move forward with that, and just because they are in the budget, that we don't necessarily have to spend.
Okay, thank you. More questions or comments? Bill?
Yes, I guess this is my third budget. One thing I've learned is that all 9 people are up here are making some compromise in some way on what is in this budget or what is not in this budget, as I have in the past. And you either have to look at the overall good or stick to your guns on some details. And I've always looked at the overall well-being of North Penn and accepted the budget. This year, there's some things missing from this budget that I find are just too important to overlook. And I could sum it up real quickly as saying I think that elementary education students are getting the short end of this budget. Between class size, the reading program, the lack of replacing the reading program with something, I do intend to vote against this budget, mainly for those reasons.
Okay, more questions or comments? David?
I fear that this board is about to set a precedent that could conceivably be repeated for every budget through the end of the decade. And that precedent is to cut programs to reduce staffing and ignore guidelines that are in the best interest of our children. This board has chosen to eliminate a highly promising reading program for the 20% of our first grade children that are in the greatest need of the early intervention services. The parents of these children are being told to send their children to learning centers because this district will not fund a one-on-one educational effort referred to as tutoring in the face of preliminary data that indicates that the Reading Recovery Program helps children at risk and improves the reading program as a whole by infusing promising new teaching techniques into the curriculum. Ironically, if the program were fully instituted, it may even show that we can save money in the long run by avoiding more costly interventions that span years instead of weeks. The board claims that it is only eliminating an expensive part of the reading program and that the rest of the reading program will not be affected. In my view, that is just not the case. How can the reading program not be affected when half-time reading positions have been eliminated at each elementary school and the number of children in our elementary schools may increase next year by up to 185 students? Will the current levels of service remain the same? I don't see how that can be. In addition to the reading program cuts, this board, the one that promised to be more open to the public than any past board, has in a single evening dedicated to the budget decided to waive past practices concerning class size guidelines without so much as scheduling a public meeting to discuss the educational impact their decision will have on our elementary schools. The majority of the board has decided to allow district class size guidelines to be exceeded by not hiring enough elementary teachers to bring it into compliance in the face of continued growth in the student population. To summarize, a reading program for first graders has been cut, half-time equivalent positions in support of first grade reading have been cut, and by not hiring an adequate number of elementary teachers in the face of rising enrollment, class size guidelines are about to be exceeded without public debate. I will not support a budget that sets this kind of precedent. On one last note, concerning the millage increase for the contract, 11 mills has been mentioned a number of times. Just like to say that if the past board's last best final offer had become the contract, the difference between the last best final offer and the current contract would have been 2.4 mills this year. I don't bring this fact to light just to trivialize the cost of the contract in any way. I bring them to light to point out that regardless of which contract would have been signed, our budget would have started out with either 8.6 mills in new spending for the last best final offer, or 11 mills, the contract we now have. Thank you.
More questions or comments?
Mr. Clement.
Pat?
I concur with Donna. I think we did an adequate job, but we could have done better. I'm not satisfied with a 14-point mill increase. I appreciate the fact that Mrs. Scheer has some concerns, and I wish they had been brought forward at the time when we started the budgetary process. And I wish that, and I placed the charge on her as finances liaison, and also as we as board members are starting July 1, not waiting until April or May of next year that we start looking at this year's budget starting July 1. It's an ongoing process. And I think that if we're going to do what we said we were going to do, then we're going to have to look at it on a daily basis or a monthly basis or however often this board meets. Thank you.
I hope we can get a consensus perhaps for a zero-based budgeting process, and we may even have a better handle on where each of our program spending is going as well as the expenses. But I appreciate it, Pat.
Okay.
We're in agreement on that.
Tom, there's been a lot of dialogue. I'd like to call for the question.
Do I need a second on that? I'll turn to our solicitor. I'm going to call for the question. Following Robert's rules, I believe I do.
Actually, at this point in time, there doesn't appear to be any more debate. If there's no more debate, you can call questions.
I think Mrs. Krieger did want to make a comment.
All right, then if you want to limit debate, then you would have to have a motion in that regard. It has to be seconded and voted on by the board. Otherwise, as the chair, you can exercise your prerogative and call on additional speakers if you so desire.
Okay, I'm going to exercise my option and call on additional speakers. Mrs. Krieger?
Thank you, Mr. Clemens. I appreciate it very much. It's with great sadness that I cannot support this year's budget. I was hoping that the conversation had earlier amongst the board in relationship to salaries would be brought to the table. With Mrs. Scheer's identified extra $200,000 removed from this budget. It's close to another mill, folks. However, in having said that, I am also very concerned with the same things that Mr. Allen has identified. The elementary students are at risk. No matter how you look at it, this board has not identified another means to provide for our first graders next year in the area of reading. I know it is the intent of this board to have a presentation in sometime September or October in the curriculum that will be implemented in September of '97. It's not good enough for me as a board. The members of the political team that I ran with, who now sit up here on this board, promised this community to use Sharp Accounting pencils. I find those pencils to be a little dull. They're dull in the area of salaries. The dollars with the adults have not been bypassed to the children in the classroom. And it's for that reason and that reason alone, the administrative salaries and the dollars that have been cut from the elementary educational system here, that I cannot and will not support this budget. Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions or comments? Call for the vote. Okay, there's been a motion made by Mr. Hill, second by Mrs. Mengel.
Let's do a roll call.
Pardon me? Yeah, we'll go ahead. Let's just go ahead and do a roll call right from the start. In favor of the proposed budget, signify by saying yes or no.
Mr. Allen?
No.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mrs. Krieger?
No.
Ms. Mengel?
Yes.
Mr. Mosey?
Yes.
Mrs. Scher?
No.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. White?
No.
Mr. Clemens?
Yes.
I have 5 in favor and 4 no. 4 against.
Okay, motion carries. Moving on to item number 6.
This is a recommendation to adopt a resolution providing a 1% transfer tax on property.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Hill, second by Mr. Allen. Question or comments?
I second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Second by Mr. Mosey. Questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Next, number 7 is a recommendation to establish the millage rate at 278.5 mils for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 1997.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Mengel.
Second.
Second by Mr. Hill. Questions or comments? Okay, we'll try an aye first. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, we'll need to do a roll call.
Mr. Allen?
No.
Mr. Hill?
Yes.
Mrs. Krieger?
No.
Mrs. Mengel?
Yes.
Mr. Mosey?
Yes.
Mrs. Scher?
Nay.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. White?
Yes.
Mr. Clemens?
Yes.
I have 6 voting yes, 3 voting no.
Okay, motion carries. Moving on to item number 8.
A recommendation for the board to consider and approve a waiver of tuition for foreign exchange students for the 1996-97 school year.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Mosey, second by Mr. Schilling. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
The next item is also a recommendation of a waiver of tuition status for students whose names are on a file in the Office of Special Education and Student Services in accordance with an existing school board policy.
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Krieger, second by Mrs. Scher. Questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Next, recommendation number 10 is to request the board's approval to enter into a contract with the Penn Foundation for an employee assistance program effective July 1 through June 30, 1997, at a cost of $25,000.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Schilling,
Second.
second by Mr. Allen. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries.
The 11th recommendation is your request for you to approve the adoption of a secondary textbook as listed on your reference. This is a genetic textbook for North Penn High School.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Krieger, second by Mr. Schilling. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Recommendation 12, referred on item 5796, is for hours, summer hours, and salary for Title I non-public school elementary reading and math program.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Krieger,
Second.
second by Mr. Mosey. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
The next recommendation, ask your approval to submit a proposal to the Merck Institute for Science Education to fund the 96-97 science, math, and technology programs for grades kindergarten through 8.
So moved.
Motion made by
Second.
Mr. Schilling, second by Mr. Mosey. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
You may want to consider 14, 15, 16, and 17 as one recommendation. They are on one reference, item 60-96, and they all pertain to submitting grants for funds related to Title I, Drug-Free Schools and Communities Act grant, and the Title II Math and Science grant.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Ms. Krieger, second by Mr. Schilling to combine items 14, 15, 16, and 17. Questions or comments on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Number 18, as is our past practice, is a recommendation to employ school psychologists for the 1996-97 school year summer work in preparation for work with students during the summer of '96 at a cost of $8,000.
So moved.
Okay, motion made by Mrs. Krieger, seconded by
Second.
Mr. Allen. Thank you. Questions or comments?
You look stuck.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Next recommendation also for summer hours in the amount of $1,209 at $23 an hour for curriculum work not to exceed a total of $27,807.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Mosey.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Krieger. Thank you. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Recommendation 20 is for your approval for the services of medical director, medical examiners, dental examiners, and team physicians for the next football season to employ these individuals at the rate of $6.50 an hour to do exams and dental checks for the next season.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Krieger. Seconded by Mr. Schilling. Questions or comments?
Just a comment, as we look at things that we're going to keep an eye on over the year, can we earmark this one, Mr. Kelly, please? Because these come up, but they never have a not to exceed. We're given tacit approval for
Say that again.
those items that we have talked about tonight, that we want to keep an eye on through the year as we better understand the budget and the budget process. I think this area here, number 20 on the agenda, we need to look at this area because we give tacit approval for something that we don't have a not to exceed amount on.
Mrs. Spangle, there's also reimbursement from the state on this. We have to provide this.
Okay.
And we do
Oh, I
get a
understand.
charge back from the state. And the rate that we have used for the doctors and dentists has been the same rate for the last 5 years, no increase.
Okay. Any more questions or
I
comments?
still think we should see a total dollar figure, though. $6.50 an hour, I think, is just too much latitude.
That's for the medical and dental clerks that come and help them.
Mr. Mosey, I can provide you with an end-of-the-year figure, but
That's fine.
I don't know what happens until we complete it.
Just a total will be fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 21.
Next recommendation is for your approval for the staff to submit our special education plan, and that's on file in the office of the Special Director of Special Education and Student Services. Your approval is requested.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Schilling, second by Mr. Mosey. Questions or comments?
Mr. Clemens, my only question is that it would be for Judy. Judy, this document is available for public distribution, correct?
Yes, it's in my office, and anyone who would like the copy can request.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Recommendation 22 is seeks your approval for the insurance package as presented on item 68-96.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Mosey, second by Mr. Schilling. Questions or comments on item number 22?
I have a question, Mr. President. On the item number 68-96, where you recap the insurance recommendations, the figures on the right-hand side, is that our premium?
Yes, Mr. Mosey, that's it.
So we're paying over $500,000 a year for our total insurance package?
That's correct. It's an increase of only 0.4%. We had an increase in item number 6, the hours of admissions policies. We then, firstly, we had a decrease in number 3. because of some excellent driving records, we have lower auto and bus insurance.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on item number 22? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Number 23, ask you to approve receipt of the gifts as listed.
So moved.
In 23.
Motion made by Mr. Hill, second by Mr. Schilling.
Going fast enough, Dr. Bowden.
We got a
That's okay. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
24 lists a variety of bids. We request that you approve the lowest and best and most responsive bids. All these items relate to preparation for the new school year.
Motion made by Mr. Schilling, seconded by Mr. Mosey. Questions or comments?
Question, I guess it's, Mr. Kelly, I noticed on the last item, athletic supplies and equipment fall 1996-97 items. You have an asterisk and they have to be distributed. I don't understand what to be distributed means.
It should be in your your blue folder that they picked out.
It came later.
It's in here, yep.
Yeah, it's, distribute means distributed at the
right
meeting.
here.
It was just,
I'm sorry, thank you.
it took them a while to develop the
I
lowest.
just want to distribute the supplies among the schools.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Other questions or comments on on all of the items on the number 24 recommendation?
Just one quick question. General fund expenditure or bond expenditure, Dennis, on these? These are 95-96 school year. Are they, where's designated funding from?
On what are you talking about, Mrs. Sharp?
On the bids.
On the equipment that's here on the bid list.
The phys ed supplies, uniforms, and athletic supplies are all general fund. The science labs are through the bond, and the installation of the folding panels is through the general fund.
So actually, you're talking just the science lab materials or bond. Is that correct? Follow you correctly?
Science labs only.
More questions or comments?
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments on these items?
I would like a report at the end if we could on the science labs. I think there's a lot of interest there on how
Yeah.
that's going.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
25 is a recommendation that you approve the award of the bid for diesel fuel at the rate of 0.5783 per gallon for winter blend diesel fuel at the rate of 0.5983 per gallon to farm and home oil companies.
Motion made by Mr. Mosey, second by Mr. Schilling. Questions or comments on diesel fuel?
How can I get that rate? Use a lot.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Under personnel, Mr. President, members of the board, the first item is to consider 23 retirement resignations that are continued through page BA7.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Mr. Krieger, second by Mr. Mosey. Let's be sure we're right down to the middle of BA7, correct? Through Michael White. Questions or comments?
Comments, Mr. President. We've given a lot of attention to Juan Bond, who's been here for 9 years, but I think we would be remiss in not giving a little attention to some of these folks that have been here 30 years. And in the case of Arlene Lutz, who's been here 40 years, I just think we should acknowledge that and just take a moment. I guess what I loved most about 4th grade at York Avenue was I learned to square dance because of Arlene Lutz. Now, I'm sure she doesn't remember me because I was very shy, quiet, and well-behaved.
Actually, she does.
Oh, she does remember?
Yes.
Oh, I can still square dance today, and I thank this woman for that. Some people will say there is no academic merit in that. I disagree. There's plenty of academic merit in it. And I look at a woman like this and gosh, not only do I feel older, but I feel enriched because of her and many of the other people on this list I had also. But 40 years. And I just don't want it to go by without mentioning that. And I don't know where she is, but I thank her. And I still square dance today because of her.
Tonight?
Tonight?
We have a demonstration.
It's still early. I don't believe you can still do it.
Any other questions or comments?
I just want
Go
to,
ahead.
just second, not so much for square dancing, but to,
He didn't have any of these teachers.
Now, wait a minute, did you have
You
one
didn't
of
have
these
any of these
teachers on
teachers.
here?
I vote against square dancing. No, I didn't have any. But I do think a round of thanks and a round of encouragement to all of these teachers that are retiring this year. And I want to, as a member of the board, wish them all the best and thank them for that service.
More questions or comments?
I would just like to say, Mr. Clemens, that 30 years in any profession is a long time. And I concur with Mr. Hill. I would just like to wish them the very best, good health and good luck and Godspeed.
More questions or comments?
Well,
I'd like- no,
yeah,
go
I
ahead.
do, Tom. You know, I sat here and I said, geez, there's people on here, but I'm not gonna lengthen this meeting by talking about them, but you guys started it. And it just so happens it is Arlene once again. My children had, we were in Oak Park for about 11 continuous years. And the lady put on a musical program. The picture, she's been here 40 years. She's not quite in her 30s still. She had major surgery, came back last year. She should have retired, but she couldn't. And she just works so hard for the kids to put on the program, and I just can't let it go unnoticed. And I want to thank Arlene for what she did for those kids. Thank you, Arlene.
This does represent well over 1,000 years of service. These retirees total. The service staff and the teachers, not the teachers alone, but the service staff and the teachers represents well over 1,000 years of service.
Well, I'm going to have to add one more. Sorry, I don't know many of these people, but I'd like to thank them for all their years of service. But from a personal note, I'd like to thank Joan Nolan for all her work in the libraries. Joan, the libraries in this school district are a better place for the work that you put into them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Okay, Mr. Clemens, my turn. I too would like to say thank you. In particular, I'd like to thank Mr. Charles Stewart, who is on this list. Mr. Stewart has been here, as the board can see, 31 years. And I believe he also had Donna Mangle, and she was up here. And I would just like to thank him for making my own child's experience in his math class, even though it was very challenging for her. It was a successful year for her. I wish all the teachers on this list the best with their retirement years, and I thank you for your years of service, but in particular to Mr. Stewart. Thanks for bringing out the best in my child's math year. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions or comments?
I just want to wish the best to all the retiring teachers. I know some of them have lots of my children, and I just wish them well.
And your wife? And your
And
wife?
my wife also. I both wish them.
Oh, she had some of these teachers.
Yeah, she had some of those
Okay,
teachers.
my turn.
You had
I'd like to
some.
publicly thank teachers on this list. Yes, I had a few of them. I'd especially like to single out Mr. Len Tullio and also Mr. Stan Delp. Both of those gentlemen very quietly and courteously approached the board with about an idea of how they thought that an early retirement could work. And I just want to say that I appreciate their ideas, and I don't think that this board just passed the idea off. I think this board took a good hard look at it and gave it our best shot to see how we could make it work. And again, I'd like to thank those two gentlemen for coming forward. You ready to vote?
Yes.
Call for the question.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Let me pause and thank the board for thanking the teachers. Teachers often don't receive enough recognition. The nature of their profession doesn't always provide feedback when they touch lives and make a difference in the growth and development of young people. So it's especially appreciated from my perspective on their behalf that you took time to make these thoughtful comments. Thank you very much. Now there are 5 retirement resignations from the support staff for your approval.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion made by Ms. Krieger, second by Mr. Mosey. Questions or comments?
Mr. Clemens, I would just like to send out thank you to these individuals who have collectively given many, many years in support service to this school district. I can't imagine working for 19, 20, some of these people 31 years for food service at the elementary level. Those individuals really have their work cut out for them, and they really do a great job. And I feel that these two particular women, Mrs. DiDomizio and Mrs. Hafer, have given the best years of their lives, and I'm sure that Knapp School shares my sentiments in their retirement and their sorrow for their retirement. I would also like to thank Mrs. Peters in your department, Mr. Ware. Eileen Peters is probably one of the most professional individuals that I've had the pleasure of dealing with on many different occasions. She is the sweetest, kindest, always smiling face, and I will personally miss seeing her, and I thank her.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
And I agree 100%.
And I don't know what you're going to do, Ken.
Cry.
I'm going to ask that Ross.
More questions or comments?
I would just like to say, Mr. Clemens, that we all went around the board and spent a few moments thanking our teachers, which we should. But we all know that there are a lot of people that make this school district run as well and as efficiently as it does. I don't expect all of us to make a comment, but I would just like to say that they are the people that stoke the fires, as you say, and they're the privates on the front lines and make a lot of us look good. And I would personally just like to thank them all for their many years of service.
Thank you. More questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much for the comments. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Again, let me thank you for thanking the support staff who behind the scenes make schools work well and serve kids well. Thank you. The next recommendation is for to consider approval of one resignation from a professional staff.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Krieger, seconded by Mrs. Mengel. Question or comments? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Next, there are 8 support staff resignations for your approval.
Motion made by Mr. Allen, seconded by Mrs. Krieger. That does take us over to the top of page 9, correct? BA 9. Pamela.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay. Everybody clear? Questions or comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
There's one request to approve a leave of absence for a professional staff member as noted.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Schilling, seconded by Mrs. Mengel. Questions or comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And one request for you to approve rescinding a sabbatical leave for a professional staff member as noted.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Krieger,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Mosey. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Recommended for your consideration are salary changes for 3 support staff members.
Oh, so moved.
Motion made by Ms. Krieger,
No,
seconded
no,
by
I
Mr.
just-
Schilling.
I just-
That's to the bottom of BA 9, correct?
Correct.
Questions or comments?
Mr.
That's top of BA 10, too.
No, that's.
Oh, excuse me, that's a
No,
nomination.
that's a
I'm
nomination.
sorry.
Right, down to BA 9. Ms. Krieger.
Mr. Clemens, I just have a question, maybe Dennis can just answer this very quickly in regards to the bottom salary. When it shows there $12,628 a year to $11 an hour, what does that come out to be roughly annually? The $11 an hour. I've seen this done before, And I think it would be helpful to me as a board to see what the difference is in the salary.
I will get you that figure.
But when you come to us in the future, Dr. Bose, I think it would be helpful, for me anyway, to see how the change from an annual rate to an hourly rate computes out, if you could do that.
Perhaps it would help if it would just explain the general classification. One is that they have regularly scheduled hours, and this is a set hourly rate, set rate of pay for these X number of hours or days, correct, Dennis?
That's correct. Perhaps we should put this on the personnel explanation sheet that is distributed periodically.
It would be helpful just to see what the difference is, because this individual is going to be having two different jobs.
Yes.
So I just
Yes.
would like to see how that comes out. Thank you.
Is there a way also to tell whether one is that there's an alteration in benefits, division district paid benefits versus not? Perhaps what we should get the bottom line.
Dr. Miller, this is a change in assignments, isn't it?
It's just a change in assignment.
So it's a change in jobs with a different pay schedule.
But at a certain point, depending on the number of hours, is when they cross over to district paid benefits, correct?
900 hours.
It's on hours, not dollars or anything of this sort. 900 hours.
Okay. Any more questions or comments?
That's fine.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
On the top of page BA10, a recommendation to appoint a support staff member.
Motion made by Mrs. Krieger.
Second.
Second by Mr. Allen. Thank you, Mr. Allen. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
It is recommended that you approve item 65-96, change of extra duty assignments for the 95-96 school year.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Mingle. Is there a second? Second by Mrs. Scher. Questions or comments on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries.
Next item, BA15, is a recommendation for approving summer school staff salaries as listed on BA15.
Motion made by Mr. Mosey.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Krieger. Questions or comments?
Is this my understanding that the tuition pays for these school staff salaries?
That's correct.
So it's-
Summer school is self-supporting.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Number 29 is a request for your approval of summer custodial maintenance crew members.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Krieger, second by Mr. Mosey. Questions or comments?
Looking over that list, Mr. President, I noticed that there seems to be a number of young students on that list. Is that generally our practice?
Yeah, we're finding we have a more difficult time each year in attracting people, although the people we get are excellent, but we do get younger people that require working papers but are adequately trained to do the job.
Well, I'm not worried about that. I know that you're using sound judgment as you usually do, but of all the folks on that list, are all of those folks students? Current or graduating?
Yeah, but many of them, quite frankly, are college students.
Okay.
It's not uncommon for people to join us in the 11th grade and stay with us all the way through college,
Okay.
which is a nice feature for us.
Well, I'm glad we have that practice, keeping the jobs local and taking care of our own. I think that's smart, and I know the kids appreciate the work.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Next recommendation seeks your approval for a trip involving the North Penn High School Choral Group, 125 students, for April 3 through 7, 1997, to Washington, D.C.
Motion made by Mr. Schilling.
Second.
Second by Mrs. Krieger. Questions or comments on item 31A? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Next two items are information items. I would point out that A informs you of the 42 professional staff members who have attained, that's the equivalent of tenure. that correct?
Yes.
The equivalent of tenure under Pennsylvania School Code. And B, of course, is a vandalism report.
Move to accept.
I think we just have any questions or comments on these.
Oh, okay.
Any questions or comments? Okay, moving on to item number 33.
I'm not sure whether this is mine or Mr. Kelly's.
And I'm not either.
But I don't mind.
Board Secretary?
It looks like it'd be.
It can be either.
Anyone can read it.
Yeah.
Dr.
Bose, why don't you start?
Let's keep it with our superintendent.
I recommend you approve the appointment of Deborah Smith as tax collector for the next school year at a salary of $600.
Motion made by Mrs. Scher, seconded by Mr. Schilling. Question or comment? Mrs. Krieger?
Mr. Clemens, we're paying this lady $600 a year to collect taxes for us? Is that what that's saying to us?
I direct that question to Mr. Kelly.
Are we paying other, I'm only asking, do we
pay
ask,
them all.
we pay them all?
That's correct.
Is this the same rate for all of them?
No, it depends on the size of the district, or the
Oh, I
size
see.
of
Size
the
of the
township.
municipal.
So if it's larger, if it's a larger township, this is more?
Most of the local townships have an elected tax collector, because this is that small portion of Bucks County that comes here to North Penn. That's why we have to appoint Mrs. Schmidt every year.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item B is a recommendation for the board to approve the listed financial institutions as depositories for school funds received by the tax collector.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Mosey and seconded by Mr. Schilling. Questions or comments?
Just one question.
Okay.
Want to make sure that, hopefully this is an obvious answer, but all those funds are protected?
Yes, they are.
Insured?
Yes, they are. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly had a
I'd like to
comment.
make a comment to the board. I'd like to thank Vernon Sin. He's on here, he retired as of December, but he did a fine job in a growing township and helped me to wade through all the interims and the transfers that were going on. Vernon did a great job.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Quick one, Dennis, has anyone else, have we been successful with any direct deposit arrangements or?
Currently, Mrs. Scher, the Montgomery Township, the new
Right.
situation the board approved there, that will become direct deposit. We're going to start working on the rest of them this year.
Okay, but you haven't called them together or asked to see if there is any willingness, cooperation?
Not at this point.
In this, I think perhaps we should move forward because it really is a no loss. There's no loss to the collector, and yet there's considerable gain to the district in positive funds. So rather than let that go by, let's put that on a nearby agenda for whether you want to do it for a group discussion or whether you want to meet with them individually. Might be a good idea to bring them all together and let them know what we'd like to see them participate in, see if the willingness is there. Okay?
More questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Next recommendation is to elect Marilyn Canavan as Assistant Secretary of the School Board effective July 1, 1996.
Motion made by Mr. Schilling.
Second.
Second by Mr. Allen. Questions or comments?
Is there, I see
Okay.
a line item for this in the budget.
Yeah, I didn't.
Is there compensation? That's what.
Not under assistant, the assistant secretary to the board didn't have any dollars placed in it, although that's.
When this position was created, with the departure of Mr. Jacobs, who had served as the board secretary for so long, there was a line item which would allow for overtime pay for Mrs. Canavan to attend these meetings. Some of you may recall that in the beginning she did attend these meetings. That responsibility for taking notes at these sessions has been handled most recently by Dottie Hatfield, and we're always pleased to have her participation. There is a cost to having someone here to take the minutes in the evening, but Mrs. Canavan has no direct remuneration for her backup work that's during the normal school day. And she also is, by this action, authorized to sign papers in my absence or to sign necessary forms as would be required to conduct the regular business of the board.
She will not be compensated for this position.
There is no additional compensation for this position, so far as I am aware. Is that correct, Mr.
That's
Kelly?
correct. That's correct. Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other? None? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We need to take a break. I'm going to ask everyone just to remain because we're on to our last page. We can do it in what, 1 or 2 minutes? All right, we're ready. Okay? We will now move on to item D, 33D.
This would elect George Starkey as a non-member treasurer of the board for a term of 1 year effective July 1, and would establish a bond of $5,000 to be paid by the school district.
Motion made by Mr. Schilling. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Mosey. Questions or comments?
There's a comment, Mr. President. My understanding is that these positions that we name from time to time are volunteer and that people are not compensated for this sort of service. Is that correct,
That's
Mr. Kelly?
also correct.
And I just would like to say that I'm pleased that somebody like George Starkey and the caliber of man that he is willing to serve us in a volunteer capacity, again, after being with us so many years in the district. And when you see a guy like George stay with us as treasurer of the Board of School Directors, you feel that you're in good hands, and our fiduciary responsibilities are better looked after. And so I'm glad he's willing to do this for another year.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Recommendation E is for the board to approve financial institutions as depositories of North Penn School funds for a period of 1 year commencing July 1.
So moved.
Motion made by Mrs. Krieger. Second by Mr. Allen. Questions or comments?
Quick one, Dennis, on Pliget, why are we still utilizing the Pliget account? With our
To be
admin-
honest, I have them on here in case their rates are better. So far this year, that has not been the case. I've not used Pliget this year, but I have them on just on the off
Oh,
chance
so in
that
other
the rates
words,
are better.
these aren't actual accounts, these aren't ones that are necessarily established, they're just ones that you
No.
wanted a prior approval?
We have a
of
Pliget account in the name of North Penn. There's just no dollars in it currently.
No money. Okay, I just wondered because I do know they have an administrative fee.
That's correct.
And also that account, as far as I knew from the Amex, was most definitely closed out, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item F, recommend approval of the officers and administrators as listed as signatories for official documents and negotiable instruments effective July 1.
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Mengel, second by Ms. Krieger. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Item G, recommend approval for a waiver of 1995 taxes on parcel number 53-00-03448-10-8 acquired by Talmadge Township for open space. The cost to the district would be $26.37.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
made by Mr. Mosey, second by Mrs. Mengel. Questions or comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
H is a recommendation for your approval of student accident and football insurance with Trustmark Insurance Company through American Management Advisors for the 1996-97 school year.
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Mengel, second by Ms. Krieger. Questions or comments?
I have a question.
Okay. Let's start with Pat, and then we'll come over to this side.
What do you mean, Pat?
What?
Don
I
says
just
he
want to know
already says anything.
what our annual premium is.
For this year, it should be, I budgeted $8,200.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hill.
Is that all paid by the school district? I mean, that the students don't pay that, I mean, most of them participate in that sport?
For the football insurance, Mr. Hill, that's
Yeah,
paid
yeah.
for by the district, but the other option, the 24-hour school time insurance, that's paid for by the parents if they opt to take that.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Dennis, the $60 that we are paying for each high school football player.
Yes, sure.
How many players do we have on our high school team these days? Because I assume we have to pay whether they're on the bench or whether they're out on the field.
I won't know that till the list comes in August. You have to ask someone else.
Oh.
I can't.
I hope your kid gets
Guesstimate
cut.
budgeting again, right? Gets cut.
I really
Okay, any other questions? Or Dennis would be glad to get back to you with that figure.
We don't know how many, we don't generally field a football team of 60 or?
Usually
40?
60.
Oh, probably.
It's been around
Yeah.
approximately 60 students.
So it would be approximately 60 students at the rate of $60 per football player, right?
60 less our kids.
Isn't that what this says?
Yes.
And yet they do it by a team at the middle school level.
That's correct.
Is the reason they just don't think those ninth graders are as rough as the 11th?
That could be.
Oh, but yeah,
I
but
don't know.
Have you
they
seen
know
the
they're
size
here
of
at the
the
middle schools.
The other company we got a quote from, they wanted $700.
Well, their schedule's not as large either.
But
They play
would-
fewer games.
Straight across for high school also, just per
No.
team?
They wanted, in fact, they wanted at least $70 per player plus $700 for junior high schools.
Insurance is the same.
Any other questions or comments
No.
on item
No.
H? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries.
Oh, I hope your kid gets cut.
Item
I really
I.
do. Who's the football coach? I want to know who the football
I
coach is.
have-
Who's that football coach?
Item I is a recommendation for the board to approve change order number 3 in the amount of $13,791.10 to Built Right Contractors for additional masonry work required at Penndale Middle School.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Hill, second by Mr. Allen. Questions or comments?
Just a comment, Mr. Cronin. Mr. Wood, this is getting awful close to $6 million.
Yeah.
I'm gonna vote for this one, but I'm not gonna vote for any more if it goes over $6
Well,
million.
the thing you need to understand, and I've said from the beginning, is we're still running at a very low rate for renovation work. We're $35,000 in total change orders on a $14 million project.
I understand that.
And one of the things you need to understand is, if a change order had been identified in the original bid document, it would have been included in the original price. And these are just surprises. Our most recent surprise, and we'll have a change order, is all the tack boards and all the chalkboards in that building, and you wouldn't know this until you did the demolition. When we took them off the wall, there are voids behind those boards, and we're in the present. At the present time, we're plastering those openings. It's something that you don't see on the original drawings as the architect does the design for the renovation, and you really don't know it until you take down the existing tack boards and chalkboards. So I would just say to you that, believe me, I beat up as hard as I can on people for change orders, and they're at a minimum, and you came through 3 buildings without a change order, which is unheard of. But in this renovation work, you're gonna have surprises. They just exist, and especially in a building that's 228,000 square feet, built in so many different segments. I mean, the second change order you're gonna deal with on the wood blocking is the 1937 old red brick vocational building over there. And until you remove the existing roof to do the edge treatment, you never know what you're gonna find. We have the same thing in the 1931 auditorium. We're gonna have some wood blocking, and I mentioned that in my green sheet. So, I just can't, I'm pleased that we're only at $35,000 and we're this far along in the project. I've discussed that with my liaison person. I've had Bill Allen through the building. I've had John Schilling through the building, and we've looked at these conditions, and they crop up.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item J.
We have a correction
I
on
thought
the
they were
third
both
line.
together.
I'm sorry, stand corrected.
No, this is number 4, Jay.
Yeah, J is a separate change order number 4 to the same contractor in the amount of $3,230 for replacement of roof deck wood blocking at Penndale.
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Schilling, second by Ms. Mengel. Questions or comments? Now we're voting on J. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And Tom, there is a clerical error, just so it gets picked up when they transfer the motion.
Yeah, it
On the
should-
third line. They
right.
just dropped a zero and put a period after the comma, so it looks like dollars. Instead of millions, it looks like 1,000 or such.
Okay.
Thousands, so.
Mr. President, I want to add item K.
Yeah, we will, since there isn't on here, we will create other business, and we will create item K.
Thank you. I'd like to move that the North Penn Board of School Directors appoint the firm of Dolphin and Bradbury to serve as the underwriters on the proposed $25 million bond issue.
So moved.
Second?
Motion made by Mrs. Scher, second by Mrs. Krieger. Questions or comments on Mr. Hill's motion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Roll call.
Mr. Allen?
Yes.
Mr. Hill?
Yes?
Mrs. Krieger?
Yes.
Ms. Mingle?
Nay.
Mr. Mosey?
No.
Mrs. Scher?
Yes.
Mr. Schilling?
Yes.
Mr. Weitz?
No.
Mr. Clemens?
I'd like to correct my vote. I did say aye, but I am opposed. No.
I have 5 voting yes and 4 voting no. Dolphin and Bradbury.
Questions or comments? We're finished. Any other business? Okay, we'll move on to item 34.
For the month of May 1996, we have cash receipts in the amount of $4,266,872.83. Receipts year-to-date, $97,993,759.02. Disbursements for the month of May, $7,088,983.37. Disbursements year-to-date, $90,306,616.02. Our investments as of May 31st totaled $17,806,502.90.
Thank you, Dennis. Any questions of Dennis before we move on? Okay, we'll move on to item 35.
I'm recommending approval of budget transfers as necessary to meet state requirements for the 1995-96 fiscal year.
Okay, is there a motion for that? Motion made by Mr. Schilling, second by Mr. Allen. Questions or comments on item 35A?
What is that amount, Dennis?
At the current time, Mr. Mosley, there's not a specific amount. As I close the books out for June 30th, we'll provide you with copies. The board will receive copies of all those budget transfers.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Then Dennis, am I correct, then basically the budget document we have, you had not made adjustments, you did not actually adjust these dollars from this budget, this is future transfers that would be taking
As we
place?
close out the books, sure, that's when I'll see if it's necessary. That there is the possibility that we will need none, but I'm doing this so I can get the books closed out during July and August.
And if we get this approval at this point, what if we disagree with the actual budget transfer that takes place?
That's my question.
Yeah. I mean, our signature's gonna be on it, our approval will be there in advance, but it's sort of like a blank check
That's right.
in an adjustment of the budget.
I guess it's a matter of fate. Yeah, I guess, yeah, to be honest.
The spending of the money or just moving it from one account to another?
Well, it's money
just,
that's.
it's not spending it, it's moving from one account to another.
But that is spending it, in a sense.
We won't solve it tonight.
Right, but this is already,
Not
is
tonight.
this dollars that have already been expended, actually?
That's correct.
You're saying through the
That
check
you've approved-
register,
that you've
so
already
basically,
approved.
we've spent the money, so it's whether or not we allow it to go through the transfer of one
That's
account to
correct.
another.
You've already approved it by the check register.
Okay, can we talk about a different process for next year, after this meeting?
Yes.
That's correct.
Not tonight, not
All
tonight.
right, that's fine.
Cool.
More questions or comments on item 35A? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 35, Dennis?
I recommend for approval the disbursements listed for the month of May in the amount of $7,273,646.50, and the disbursements for the month of June in the amount of $495,461.99.
So moved.
Before there's a motion, what do we want to call this? That we have two 35s. We want to call it 35B?
Yeah.
35B. Okay, is there a motion on 35B? Motion made by Ms. Mengel, second by Mr. Schilling. Questions on, or comments on item 35B? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 36, Dennis.
For the month of May also, for food service, we had an income in the amount of $403,060.73. Raw food cost of $153,079.01, which gave us a gross profit on sales of $249,981.72. Deducting our operating costs for the month of $138,597.49 gave us a net profit for the month of $111,384.23, which translated into a year-to-date profit of $376,907.88.
Any questions or comments on the food service report?
Tom, I would just like to say in a conversation with Mrs. Irwin today, and I think it's so important to note on behalf of her workers and the department that we are up year-to-date in lunches. We're up by 96,000 lunches over last May. Month to month, May 95 to May 96, and I think that's a real compliment to that staff.
Any other questions?
Total lunches?
Excuse me?
Total lunches?
Total lunches.
Did you say?
Year-to-date, last year we had 902,000, we're running 998,000 this May. And the profits are up.
In fact, you should go there for lunch.
I think I would. Do I go there next week?
Hey, it's cheap too.
Really, and the board should realize too, the vending has, if you look at the report, we've made $75,000 from vending alone, which is it's a great tribute to Dottie wanting to do it.
She's a great gal.
Okay.
You know how I feel about that.
Thank you, Dennis. Any other questions or comments for Dennis? Okay, we'll move on to item 37, federal programs. Dr. Bose.
I'd only point out that the board has approved submission of grants for a variety of programs, including drug-free schools, Title I, Title II, etc. You've already dealt with federal programs tonight.
Okay, any questions or comments on federal programs? Hearing none, we'll move on to number 38, our solicitor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have no report at this time.
Thank you. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mrs. Krieger, second by Mr.
Mr.
Schilling. All
Clemens,
those
I'd
in
like to
favor?
wish you and your wife a very happy anniversary.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Mr. Hill,
Aye.
too.